everybody, and if you haven't seen me before, welcome to my channel. This is Sarah from SH Millinery. Now I get a lot of requests from subscribers to do tutorials on various things, and one lady asked me, could I do a tutorial on an open brim like this one. Now open brims is where you block the brim separately to the crown, and they come in all sizes. They come very big, very small. I'm just using a smallish one here because obviously for the purposes of the video it's easier, and it also means I do have a crown that fits this brim. So you need something that's going to fit inside there, and it does fit, but I've got it the wrong way around, I think. Hang on, I'll get the front and the back together in a minute. There we are. Anyway, those are what we're going to be using. We're going to be using this crown block and this brim. And we're going to do it in sinamay. Now, before we do anything else, we're going to cover both of these in cling film so that the sinamay doesn't stick to the block. Now obviously it's a bit difficult with a block this shape, so really you've got to sort of wind it round and do it a bit cack-handed. So I'm going to do it like that. Okay, put there, put it all in, and a bit more around there. That's a bit bumpy, so just flatten that out. So I'm going to put it all over the rim. I may have to get that bit around there. Okay, so that's got cling film on it, and then the crown will have cling film on it. So again, just to stop everything sticking to your block. Now, when you're using sinamay, it's best to use a minimum of 2 layers for something like this. Otherwise, it will be way too flimsy and you won't get anywhere. So, what I've decided to do is to use this really nice piece of printed sinamay, which has a sort of a snake skin effect on it. Now, because it's printed only on one side, and it will see through it, the print won't show up very well unless I use a base colour underneath. So I've decided to go with quite a dark base colour. So I'll be using this as my second layer. And as you'll see, once you've got the snakeskin print on top, you see it better. You see more of the pattern. So these are the 2 I'm going to be using for my blocks. So first of all, I'm going to do the brim block, or as one lady said, looks like a toilet seat without a lid, which I thought was a very good analogy. So first of all, I'm going to cut a piece that will cover my brim block. So what I'm doing is I'm just roughly measuring. Now remember, we have to push into this block, so make sure that you've got plenty to go all the way around. Okay, so I'm going to cut off a piece about this big. And I don't like the salve edge because it makes it hard to manipulate, so I cut that off as well. So then we have our base piece, and now we're going to look for the same size in our top piece. And I'm hoping that I can get the whole hat out of this because I don't have a very big piece of this sinamay, but you know me, we'll make it up as we go along and see how we go. And again, I'm going to cut off the salve edge of this piece. There we are. So hopefully you've seen all that. Let's just move other extraneous things out of the way for the moment. Right, now obviously I need to dampen these pieces. So I'll move the block to one side. And what I'm using here is a potting tray that would normally be used in a greenhouse, but it's great because it's nice and big and I can get quite a bit in it. And I use this tray for all sorts of things, dyeing things, dampening things. So I've got my 2 pieces of sinamay there, and now I need to dampen them. So I've got my spray bottle that I'm hoping will work. Yeah. So I'm going to dampen it all over. Now we're going to have to leave that to sort of soak into the straw. Now, if your straw is quite flimsy, you might want to add some stiffener. So I've got some PVA stiffener here. So I'm just going to put a light sprinkle of it on, just to give me some added stiffener. And I'm going to spread it about with my hands. So spread it into the sinamay. And you'll see by doing that. There we are. So that's my sinamay now, all damp and a bit drippy. So get rid of all your drips. You don't want it so wet that it's going to drip all over your workbench. There we are. So I'll move the tray out of the way and go back to my block. So because we want 2 layers, we're going to try and block these in 2 layers, not one and then the other, because that can make it a bit difficult. You'll know if your sinamay is damp enough, because if you pull it, it will stretch. So do that to loosen up the fibres, and you should have more luck when you're actually putting it onto the block. So, right, we're going to push down in the centre and push over the sides. So, just to get a starting base. We're not doing anything amazing yet. Now, because we don't want this middle section and it will cause problems, I'm going to cut out a little piece here. And normally I'll bring my chalk in and mark it. But, as with most things, I've forgotten to bring that into this room. So, I'm just going to... There are 2 ways you can block on this type of block, and I'm just doing the simplest for you. So, I'll cut out that middle if I don't need it. There we are. I've given myself a bit more manoeuvrability. So, what we're going to do is we're going to pin it and fix it to the block. Now this is quite fiddly to do, so we're going to put a north, south, east and west pin in to give us a starting. Probably cut my hole a bit too big, but there you are. So I'm going to stretch it. My hands are a bit wet and slippy now from using the thing. Now what we need to do is we need to not have pleats in it. As you can see, we're ending up with pleats. So what you'll need to do is cut some little V's. Don't cut them too high, otherwise you won't be able to fix the hat to the crown. I said it is a bit fiddly and it takes some time to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to carry on. You'll see what I'm doing, but I'm going to speed the video up so that you don't have to watch me for half an hour fiddling. if you need to cut some more V's into the sinamay, obviously pick the block up and do it from the underside, because you'll struggle to do it from the top side. So anyway, we'll put more pins in. So this is really, because I don't know why I'm using the long pins. They're not great for this. Really, you need blocking pins, or I'm using matte pins here, which aren't great because they are steel and they tend to rust. Once you think you've got it roughly as you want it, we're now going to fix it to the outside. Now, a lot of you have seen that I make my own ring blocks, but I know a lot of you aren't able to do that. It does show in one of my other videos how to make these. But if not, obviously good old string. What you need is enough string to go round, and it needs to be strong string. You fold a loop on one end and you just tie a knot in the loop like that, and then you poke the other end of the string through that loop, and now you've got a running string ready to go round. Now this block has a string ridge on it. If you haven't got a string ridge, you've got a bit more difficulty, and also you might have to pin rather than string. So it's up to you really. But what I do is put a pin in the string block at my starting point, get my string over the edge, start pulling my long end. You can see it's a bit fiddly. Start pulling my long end, and it will start pulling it in to the sinamay. You might need another pin in somewhere because I've lost the brim ridge. Right. I always think with this you could need about 4 pairs of hands, but there we are. But what you do is you just keep pulling the long edge and it will pull the string up tight, and then we're going to pull this out and make it neat and tidy. So what I'm going to do is I'll be back in a sec. Now be careful that this doesn't get too dry while you're working it, because obviously I'm working in a heated home at the moment and it can get a bit dry and it makes it harder. Anyway, as I said, this block has a ridge. You can just see it there, where I want the string to sit. So I'm poking it down into that ridge and tightening it up here. I can take my pin out now because I don't need that. And I'll tighten it up and force it into that ridge all the way round. And get the string as tight as you can. So excuse my grey head probably popping into the picture here. So I've pulled and pulled and pulled, and I feel around and it's in that ridge. As I say, if you haven't got a block with a ridge, you will have to pin. Right, so I'm going to put a pin in to hold the string in place and stop it coming undone. And now what I need to do is ease out all these wrinkles and crinkles. So what I do is pull the sinamay, hold on to the top because you don't want to pull out your pins at the bottom. So, and that pin's just fallen now. So pull and stretch so that all the wrinkles and folds disappear. Now you'll see in effect you use not a lot of sinamay on the actual block, but you do have to cut quite a big piece so that you've got lots of manoeuvrability. Don't ever cut it too small and you find yourself in a real pickle then getting it all the way round. So it's quite nice that you normally find at the smaller ends, obviously the more curved ends is where you need to pull it and stretch it and work out any crinkly bits. So again, apologies for my head popping into view. Right, now what I'm going to do is make sure it's really, really tight down to the inside. Now, if you've cut, be very careful because you need at least 1/2 inch that's not cut so that you can stitch that to the crown. So I'm going to go around and pin this even more securely now. And again, easing out any lumps and bumps. You can stretch the sinamay over with your pins. Make sure that all is smooth. So you'll see this side it's not, so I can pull it down, put the pin in and pull it down to stretch it into place. Sinamay is very good. It will take a lot of stretching and pulling. So, and we want this really tight to the thing, so I'll see if I've got any more. I've got pots and pots of pins, but none of them are sort of in proper order, so I end up having to root about for things. So see if I can get an ordinary dressmaker's pin in there. Nah, don't hold it very well, but still. Right. Now we will be ironing this later. So I just wanted to warn you that that is what we'll be doing later on. Right, so you can see that it's all smooth here and it's smooth here. If you see any little crinkles, oh, there's a crinkle, you see a crinkle trying to come to the fore. I will not have a crinkle. Again, another pin required. And there's a bit of a crinkle there. So again, pull out your pins, stretch your sinamay down and get it all neat and tidy. But as I say, we'll be ironing it in place as well. So check. So there we are. So that brim is put to one side to dry. And now we've got to concentrate on the crown. Now, again, I'm hoping I've left myself enough of this to do the crown. I think I probably can. So I'm going to cut some pieces for the crown, and I'm cutting off the salve edge because that's no good to me and it will stop me stretching the sinamay. And I need a piece for underneath. I think a lot of people, they buy printed sinamay and they think, oh, how am I going to use this? Because if you put two pieces together, you don't see the pattern anymore. You see a mishmash. So you always have to have a plain sinamay underneath. As you can see, look, if I put two pieces of this together, it doesn't look nice because the pattern's all overlapping. So you need a plain piece underneath. So what I'm going to do is wet this again in my tray. So I've just got plain water in this bottle. I squirt more when it's cold because it doesn't absorb so quickly. And I've got PVA stiffener in this one. This is from the trimming company and it comes in a small bottle and you make it up. But you can buy your own PVA, which is called woodworker's glue, white glue, school glue. I think it's Elmer's glue in the USA. And you just mix it. It's probably about 10 parts glue to about 20 parts water. But you work it out yourself because some people like it stiffer and some people don't. Now, the only thing I would say is if you've got PVA in a squirty bottle like this, as soon as you've used it, rinse the nozzle under a tap. Otherwise the glue will solidify in the squirty bit and you won't be able to use it afterwards. But I'll be doing that in a moment when I'm not talking to all of you lovely people. So there we are, that's all wet and squirted and soggy. And again, I don't want it dripping all over the table, so I get rid of all the excess. It does, well, if you drip it all over the table or your workbench or whatever, it will mop up quickly with a wet cloth. And you can get rid of it afterwards, but you need a hot wet cloth and a bit of scrubbing to get rid of it. Because PVA isn't waterproof. But there again, sinamay hats shouldn't be worn in the rain. So now I've got my block. I'm going to do again, stretchy, stretchy, get it all loosened up. And hope that I've got enough to provide me with the top of the hat. And I'm going to put these at cross angles, okay? Now, you either pin or you use a rope again, or I'm using one of my rubbery band things. So push it down as far as the bottom of my printed sinamay, because I haven't got a lot of it, so it's going to be a shallow crown. That's too big. It needs to be really tight, so that one's a bit too big. So I'll use the next size down, which I think is that one. Yeah, because you need to be able to stretch it over and pull it onto the block so that it's really tight. Takes a bit of welly, this. Excuse my odd English expressions, a bit of welly. So I've got more that side than that side of the printed, so I'm going to adjust that, pull it back up again and pull it down that side. I want it sort of equidistant, so pull a bit there, that gives me a bit more leeway. Right, I've got it down about as far as it will go, and then I pull and stretch, but pull your bottom layer first and get that stretched fully onto the block. And then pull your sinamay. Now, because we're blocking square fabric onto a round block, we will end up with some pleats. Now, where you decide where your front and back is, where you're bothered about there being a lot of pleating in the fabric, and again, adjust, pull, stretch, etc. And again, we will be ironing this to flatten out all those pleats. So I'll just sit here for a minute and twiddle, because I want them to be as minimal as possible. But you will have some. There's no way of not having them, because square things don't go in a, what is it? Square things in a round hole or something like that. Right. Okay, so I'm pretty pleased with that. I've got it down as far as I can get it to the edge of my printed sinamay. I didn't have a lot of that, so I knew I was going to be tight. So my crown is probably going to be quite shallow, about 3 inches, which is not great. I could have done with it being 4 really, but try and get it equal all round. What's it this side? Again, it's about 3. So it is going to be a shallow crowned hat. So it'll probably be a bit more like a perch. But you can't have everything in life, can you? I just saw this bit of sinamay in my stock room and I thought, oh, we'll use that. But I should have realised there probably wasn't going to be enough. Trying to get it down as far as... Right, here we are. I've left these to dry. I must admit I used a hairdryer just to give them a quick whiz. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to trim the excess from around this brim, because it's going to get in the way. Only roughly, it doesn't have to be exact. and all that excess can be used for something else, or it might even be used on this hat, who knows. Right. Okay, so we'll move that out of the way. Okay, now I've got my steam iron handy here to the fore, and I'm now going to iron around. I'm using a clean tea towel, as long as you use a yeah. So I'm going to iron all around the side. It's not very easy on a fairly small block, I must admit, but do the best you can. Just irons any crinkles out. So let's go all the way around like this. Really, you shouldn't use your best iron, but I am at the moment because I can't be bothered to go out to the workshop and get my hat iron. So, good job I've got a cloth to protect the iron. So I've taken all the pins out of the middle, and then I'm just pressing down with the iron just to get a really good firm edge. And actually I'm just going to trim that there. I could do with a little bit of a V, give me a bit of leeway there. So works really well if you've got one of those really tiny irons, but I haven't. I keep meaning to buy one, but I haven't done so far. Right, I'm going to set that aside for 10 minutes so that any steam that has come onto it and dampened it again will dry off. So I'm going to put that to one side, and I'm going to do the same with the crown. So give it a press on the top. Just means you get crisper edges if you iron it. And then I'm going to do the sides. You see what I mean? It's flattened it all down, and if you did have any little bumps and lumps, they're now flattened. So carry on all the way around the block. And it gives a much better finish, as you'll see. So you compare it there to there where I haven't ironed yet, and you can see it's a bit bumpy there. Normally I'd do it with the block up, but obviously you can't see if I do it that way around, so I'm doing it the other way. So just any bits that you might see that you feel need another press. There we are. So that's all pressed down now. Looks all nice and smooth. And that'll be ready for taking off the block in a moment. Right, so we've got our brim block here. I just need my other scissors, just reach over. Don't use dressmaking scissors for straw, they'll be absolutely wrecked. So what I'm going to do first is take the pin out of my string and take the string off. So, and I'm just going to check that it is dry in that string groove. Yes. Now I should be able to take this off the block without too much trouble. Let's see. There we are, it's off the block. Now I've got to peel out all the, there we are. Right, now what I've got to do is I've got to trim this edge and leave myself just enough to sew at the crown. So I'm going to go round. Actually, it's better if you've got a smaller pair of scissors. I've only got a very small pair here, but I'll use those because obviously I'm going around a curve. And there we are. Now, it still feels a little bit floppy. It's actually still a bit damp, but we will be wiring this brim, which will give it, make it more sturdy. Now, because I had a string block that I could do the string in, I've got a good place to actually cut. So I'm going to just follow that string line around. These scissors are not good. Mark it with the chalk all the way around. It's a bit high actually. Blocking spring off again. Okay, stand out. And I've now got to get the block off the crown. Now, I hold it against my body to manipulate it, which I can't really show you in the video, but just to grab the edge of the straw. And then when I know it's coming out, there we are. So there we are. And now what I'm going to do is cut around that mark I've made with my blocking spring, etc. So find an easy. So now we have the crown and we have the brim. And what will happen is the crown will be fixed to the brim like this. What we've got to do is get the crown just over your inner edge. Decide which is your front and back before you start, or if you've got back and front on your block. Right. So push it in and push it down and make sure all the straw is in where you want it. Okay, so that's how that's going to go. So this is now going to be our hat, as you can see. And what we're going, so I'm going to sew brim reed around this brim, and I couldn't make up my mind. I thought, should I edge it in Petersham? I had all different colours out, or should I edge it in the sinamay? And I've decided to do the sinamay, so I'm going to show you how to do a bias strip with that. But first off, I'm going to put brim reed around this hat. So I'm going to move the camera down a bit so you can see a bit closer to what I'm doing. So, here's my brim reed, which is all pingy and springy and whatever. And I'm going to cut roughly as much as I need for the brim. It has to be roughly. And that's going to be for the brim. And I'm going to start at the back of the hat, which I've decided will be this side. So what I'm going to do is sew the brim reed and fold over the edges like this. And I'm just going to fold over so that I when I put the bias strip on, there'll be a nice neat edge. I'm going to use a single thread to attach this brim reed. You could do it on a sewing machine if you want to, but I'll do it by hand at the moment. I've forgotten which my back and front is. Don't think it matters much on this. Anyway, so I'm going to start stitching. So I'm going to do a blanket stitch all the way around. Okay. Pressing the straw down as I go. So now you'll have to excuse if my hands shake in the videos at any one time. I have got a condition that gives me slightly shaky hands, so sometimes they're worse than others. Not great when you want to sew, but there we are. We've all got life's little things to bear, haven't we? And that's not a major one. So, right, I'm not going to bore you witless with sewing all the way around this edge, so I'm just going to get off and do it. Okay, and I'll come back to you in a moment. So I've sewn my brim reed all the way around. You can see I've done it with blanket stitch. So I've sewn that all the way around the brim. Right, let's come up a little bit so you can see. So we see. And now we're going to stitch the two pieces together. So what I've done is I've put a pin up north, south, east and west, straight down. Don't try and put them in that way. Just do them straight down. You'll need double strong thread. You'll need extra strong thread, right, rather doubled. Now I'm using a curved needle. That's not a necessity. It's just that I quite like using a curved needle for going around corners and things. So what we're going to do is, you can start on the other side because we're going to cover that up with a sweatband, because obviously you have to cover the whole hat up. Now don't sew too near the edge because you need a space for where you're going to sew your grosgrain, your petersham. You can see there I'm going to sew a back stitch all the way around, but leave enough leaf. So what I've done is I've stitched with back stitch all the way around there, and you can see the stitching on the other side obviously, and you always will with this type of hat, which is why you've got to decorate it here and put petersham inside. What I am going to do is double check the size in case I have to ease my stitching out or ease the sinamay out. So I stick it back on the block and go, does it fit that head? Yes, it does. Hoorah. So there we have, our hat is coming together now, nicely now. Now, doing that made me think, I should say, if you're going to do this type of hat, your crown and your brim have got to be the same hat size. One has got to fit inside the other pretty much exactly, otherwise you are not going to be able to fit the two straws together. You're going to find one's too big or one's too small, and you'll have to do a lot of faffing about. And making a hat in two parts like this is a lot harder work, so you know, you don't want to give yourself any more work than you have to. So we're going to carry on with the next stage of it now. Right, the next stage is that we're going to want a petersham headband to cover up our stitching inside. So pretty much get roughly what you need for your headband. I always cut off quite a bit extra. And we're going to swirl this and stitch it inside. So I'll just turn my iron back on. Bear with me a second. Oh. I'll use my tea towel that I was using earlier on. And I've shown how to swirl lots of times, but I'll show you again in case you haven't seen all my videos. Now keep subscribing and following everything we do, because I should be doing a giveaway soon, so that will be nice. It doesn't really work on a tea towel. What you've got to do is steam and swirl so that you curve the Petersham, which is why you can only use millinery Petersham. You can't use horrible polyester stuff, it doesn't work. So you just give it a very, you don't need a lot of curve, you just need a little bit of a curve. And then what you do is, turn the iron off or I'll melt something, I'm good at that. What you do is start at the back of your hat, and the top curve fits to the top of the straw, like this. And again, pin downwards, not across. And then you pin all the way round, like this. So pin all the way around, and then we're going to stitch that with teeny tiny stitches all the way through the hat to cover up where we've sewn the two pieces together. So I'll carry on doing that now. Right, once you've sewn your Petersham all the way inside with little tiny stitches, give it a blast of steam. Like that, and then put it back on your hat block, and what that will do is make the Petersham all nice and straight and even and neat and looking lovely. So there we have our hat so far, and now we've got to think about the trim and the edge. Right, now we're going to make a trim for the edge of the brim. I would have liked to have used the printed sinamay, but I didn't have enough. As you know, it's just an oddment. So I'm going to use the plain sinamay. Now we need it cut on the bias. I probably haven't got quite enough length. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it wider than I would normally. So I've penciled a line. You can just about see it there. I'm going to pencil a line there, and I'm going to pencil another line here, and I'm going to cut, I'm going to cut my two outside lines, and then I'll have a strip. So let me get, you probably won't see this on the camera very well because the pencil line won't show up, but that's why I use a pencil, because when I put it on the hat it won't show up either. So that's the method behind my madness. Now I don't want, again, the self edge, so I'm just going to snip that off. Now it's probably not quite long enough to go around. No, it's not. So I'm going to have to make it long enough. So I am going to steam it. Oh, and fold it. Hope you can see this okay against this lime green tea towel. But that's because my kitchen is lime green and orange, so my tea towels match. So what I'm going to do is, that's the halfway point of the sinamay, so just put a fold there so you know where the halfway point is. You can just do that with your hands, don't have to do the iron. Now we're going to fold over one edge towards the middle, but not quite to the middle because I want to stretch this sinamay. So we get our steam iron and not very easy on a tea towel, easier on an ironing board. Let's just fold it a bit and then steam it. There we are. Right. And do the same again on the other side. You might find you've dampened it enough with the steam that you don't need to particularly iron it. There we are. So we've folded it over all the way along. And now what we do is fold that to the middle, and then we do press down with the iron. So like that. I hope my head's not getting in the way. I'm always getting my head in the way, aren't I? Right, so I'm going to give it another whack of steam, and then I'm going to pull it, and it makes it longer. And now I'm hoping, yes, it'll go all the way around. So what I'll do is trim the ends. Where's my back and where's my front? Put it over the edge. Clip, and then you can either hand or machine stitch, whatever suits you best. So if it's a bit thick in places, you can stretch it, steam it and stretch it again so that it fits all the way around the hat. So here we are, all the way to the back. And obviously you'll fold over and neaten at the back. Can't see a thing, can you? Because I'm holding it up against me. So there we are. We've made an edge to the hat now. And then it just needs the trim around the middle.